Nice. There we go. So I was trying to share this on the Twitters, and I'm not sure where the hell a saved tweet goes, but we will get this going momentarily. Just kind of make sure that I bring it up in the second window. Obviously, greetings, everybody. Happy Tower Tuesday, as I like to say. Let me just make sure that this tab is muted. I'm about to share. Mute that teasy. All right. Get this shared here. So I hope everybody is having a fantabulous start to the new year. This is my first time actually getting to do this show in a couple of weeks because of the fact that I had just gone back to school. So that has been fun. But obviously with the big announcement this week about, okay, let me just so live ahora for some palaver about the new Sai Stephen, oops, typing too fast, Sai Stephen King novel. Holly, yes, and I'm sure everybody who joins, whether in the live chat here or in the proceedings afterwards, will have some thoughts about Holly and the extent of her usage by El Rey. Okay, for some palaver about the new Sai Stephen King novel, Holly. An update on the Boogeyman. So there's interesting news about that, leaving Hulu. And Razzies, oh boy. It's just a little blurb about them, but it'll still be interesting. Okay. On Hail to Stephen King. That link thing below on Enfuegotainment, the new destination. Okay, so make sure I select all. Maybe I can just... That's one of the things about working on this friggin' laptop. I need to get like a separate mouse so that I can do the highlight sort of things because I all too often forget the hotkeys for that. Okay. I just have to share this onto the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, and we will be all gravy, as the youngsters like to say. So almost there, everybody, almost there. This was totally impromptu, and I was teasing that I wanted to try to do something last night because the announcement came yesterday, but unfortunately schedule has been just nuts since getting all of this started. So, okay, well, they will just have to deal with it as such because my time is limited, as I'm sure everybody else's is as well. So I'm going to like that. And okay. And since this was impromptu, I don't even know the extent of anybody who is going to jump on until after the fact. So that's okay, though, because there's a lot to cover in a limited period of time. So I'm just going to get stuff started now. All right. Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I'm known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. Yeah, that guy with the awesome Slipknot font, which was jacked, obviously, for that particular flag up there. But yes, amanitos, and welcome to Enfuegotainment, the new destination for this coverage, Hail to Stephen King, that this was the beginning of the 7th year of doing it. There were 6 previous seasons and over 330 episodes that were done on the horror show. But due to a massive channel restructuring and relaunch that we are in the midst of, and also with my dude, the founder of The Feast, over at the horror show, which I'm still very much involved with, just saw him on Sunday for filming some stuff. But yeah, Cecil Laird has his short film based on the Wes Craven's New Nightmare. It's a direct sequel featuring Miko Hughes returning as Dylan Porter. So he has a short fan film, which we are all very excited about at the horror show. So between that and a big channel restructuring, it was time for this to migrate over. But also, big thing just in brief, because I'm not sure anybody stumbling upon this if they won't necessarily know, but I actually just 2 weeks ago, yesterday, returned to Arizona State University to pursue my bachelor's in film and media studies. I had a associate's in audio production technology, and so I had a day job, work-related opportunity for tuition reimbursement. And so for that reason, it was incredibly exciting to get the opportunity to return and study film and media and all that jazz. So hail to Stephen King. This is its first time being on in about 2 weeks now. So yes, it will hopefully be on Saturdays and probably pre-recorded going forward, but there's not really much to say beyond that. But school has been stressful, but this is now 2 weeks in. This is the last couple of days where I feel like I'm finally getting a bearing on the recalibration that it's all entailed with still trying to work full-time as best I can. Thankfully, as a 1099 and an independent contractor with the type of work that I do, it's been a little bit easier trying to do the juggling act and whatnot. But a little bit more of not even so much a learning curve, but most definitely just trying to reprioritize and get I don't know. It's been a little more demanding than anticipated. However, with the announcement this past week, now we knew that there was a new Stephen King novel and that novel was Holly, based on the Holly Gibney character that has appeared in a whopping 5 different stories previous to this. Okay. But we knew that she was getting her first full-fledged novel, okay, because she had been a supporting character in the Bill Hodges trilogy, so all 3 of those installments. She was also a little bit more of a primary character, but still of the supporting and minor role in The Outsider, which was kind of a pseudo sequel, epilogue, spin-off, I guess you could say, of the Hodges 3 books. And then we also had, from about a year or 2 ago now, If It Bleeds, which was 2020, if I remember correctly, 20 or 21, I'm trying to remember. But it was like when, Captain Trips was still raging hard, and there were stories in there, most notably Life of Chuck, which was definitely the standout. But the title story, If It Bleeds, which was a pretty lengthy novella, saw Holly Gibney return as the lead character, essentially, with the Finders Keepers, private investigation agency that she had founded with Bill, that she is continuing to do with, I forget the name of the character, but I believe it was the former partner of Bill Hodges, and he had retired. But we'll get to that when we look at this Entertainment Weekly article, which anytime they finally get through the promotional process of debuting like an excerpt from the book and having the big press release and everything, from Scribner. Once we get that, that's when we usually have a firm release date, and that's also when we know that it's ramping up and it's going to be coming soon. And sure enough, they did announce that it is coming in September, which is also, it will be almost a year to the day from when the release of Fairy Tale was. And so Holly, which is the first full-length novel, as I said a moment ago, about the Holly Gibney character, is going to be released on September 5th by Scribner. They debuted the first cover art, which you saw on the thumbnail, obviously. And just for some descriptive purposes, you've got this ominous-looking home, and it's got like a beautiful sunset, but almost an eeriness of the contrast of the sunset. So you've got the blood red crimson, like an orange, like segueing up into the purple with the stars and everything. And you have some very slightly creepy orange lights that are allowing you to peer into this home for those who are actually looking at the image right now, or if you just want to bring it up in a separate window or something. I still need to figure out how to get I know there's various softwares that allow you to actually, I know there's like Streamlabs and StreamYards and all these different ones. I need to, when I am on my break in a couple of weeks from, because I have a little 2-week break in between how they break up these Arizona State online semesters, I need to get properly acclimated with, those different programs where you can actually overlay images in the midst of the live thing. I'm positive it's not rocket science compared to some of the, the science course that I'm taking right now has been, because I'm not a science-minded person. I'm a history and an English sort of mind. And the maths and the sciences were most definitely less my thing. And I've been taking this class that is, looking at the electromagnetic spectrum and the history of the development of that from that's some my most recent research paper that I was working on this past weekend, was very stressed out about, was on it was about just the history of that. The name is eluding me. Astronomics, I believe it was. Anyway, long story short, we're here to talk about Stephen King. But yes, so back to it. We've got two different interesting clues into what is obviously going to be going down, and we'll get to that when I read the premise of this, because we do have a synopsis that was released in the Entertainment Weekly article as well. So you do see that there is somebody that is peering out of a window in the second floor there in the orange, and yeah, they almost look like they're just kind of peering out to see if anybody is taking notice of this seemingly inconspicuous home. And the reason for that clue, and you can see if you look a little more closely, the curtain is kind of pulled away. So it's somebody almost like they're on watch. You know, they're trying to make sure that nobody is taking notice of the home, because as you can see in the other illumination, there is obviously somebody that is in the basement of this home, and presumably against their will. I mean, why else would the person be standing watch on the second floor and keeping an eye out? And yeah, so those are our two big clues, much more of a clue than we have from, I believe it's the UK or some overseas region, which is the other image that you see in the thumbnail. And that's the one with the magnifying glass and the blood and everything. So I feel like maybe the cover art here is perhaps a little more spoilery of, or at least indicative of, you know, what the story is going to be about. So yeah, October 5th. I'm looking at the excerpt really quickly, so we'll get to it. But yeah, September 5th is when this book is going to be releasing, and so that is obviously exciting. And yeah, so just to continue on with this particular article, so let's just get right into what they have to say here in Entertainment Weekly. So the reluctant private detective is searching for the truth behind a string of disappearances in a Midwestern town. And so that is one thing to keep in mind about Holly, is that all of these stories, and sorry, my cat has just been killing myself and Lady Catherine's allergies lately. But so let's hear what they have to say in preview about it here in Entertainment Weekly. Holly Gibney has been a recurring presence in Stephen King's books since introduced in 2014's Mr. Mercedes, and over time she has transformed from a shy recluse to a full-fledged, occasionally tough private detective. Now Gibney is returning in King's new novel, Holly, to solve the gruesome mystery behind multiple disappearances in a Midwestern town, and EW has an exclusive excerpt, I'm sure we're going to get to momentarily. Okay, so here we go. When Penny Dahl calls the Finders Keepers detective agency for help locating her missing daughter, assuming that's who we're seeing in the cover art in the basement here, Holly is reluctant to accept the case. Her partner, Pete, has COVID. Her very complicated mother has just died, and Holly is meant to be on leave. But something in Penny Dahl's desperate voice makes it impossible for Holly to turn her down. Mere blocks from where Bonnie Dahl disappeared live professors Rodney and Emily Harris. They're the picture of bourgeoisie respectability, I'm assuming? Married octogenarians devoted to each other and the semi-retired lifelong academics. But they are harboring an unholy secret in the basement of their well-kept, book-lined home, one that may be related to Bonnie's disappearance. Okay, so perhaps it's not Bonnie, or maybe it's like a previous victim. I'm already getting Black Phone vibes a little bit, Steve, and I know he was working on this before the adaptation, but then again, Black Phone, his son Joe Hill's story, that was published in 20th Century Ghosts like over 15 years ago. Anyway, different stuff, I mean, but some connective tissue, maybe some similar DNA. Anyway, and it will prove nearly impossible to discover what they are up to. They are savvy, they are patient, and they are ruthless. Okay. Holly must summon all her formidable talents to outthink and outmaneuver the shockingly twisted professors. I could never let Holly Gibney go, King said in a statement. Obviously, Steve, we're going to get to that shortly. She was supposed to be a walk-on character in Mr. Mercedes, and she just kind of stole the book and stole my heart. Holly is all her. Holly as in the title of the book. Holly will be published September 5th, as I said. So scrolling down, before I get to this excerpt, which is dated, interestingly enough, October 17th, 2012. So perhaps, I'm trying to remember the context of when the Hodges stories take place, because Bill may, from the preview's sake, yeah, we know Bill is no longer around. So that's at least got to be the case here. But then again, if it's taking place, at least with some of the story during COVID, and that was where King said that he started working on this in the midst of the pandemic, and then things changed up and so on and so forth. But so with 5 stories at this particular point, man, I just genuinely, Is it overkill? Has she been overused? I know that when you have an affinity for a character, you most definitely want to return whenever you can, at least. And thankfully, he gave it a little bit of room to breathe with doing Fairy Tale in between. And but then again, he had just done If It Bleeds right before. So I don't know. We've had this will be her 6th story in the span of less than a decade, because if I recall correctly, Mr. Mercedes was 2014. So, but overkill of the character. I have seen, shout out to, I believe it's Lilja's library, if I'm not mistaken, but they had said, and they've been covering Stephen King on the internet since like the inception of the internet. I mean, we're talking, they've been doing it for like 30 years. They've been covering Stephen King on the web. I remember in the days when we used to call it that, when it was still all fresh and whatnot. But so they've been covering Stephen King for decades at this particular point online. And they said that they are seeing more and more constant readers who are saying that they're so over Holly that they don't care. They have no interest in, even giving this book a chance, because of the fact that they want Sai King to break away and do something different. Well, I guess he kind of did that with Fairy Tale. I mean, even though I was relatively critical of that book because of the fact that I felt like there were so many retreads in even that. So I don't know. I mean, I especially enjoyed just seeing how she has changed as a character over the course of all of these books, because when we do meet her initially in Mr. Mercedes, she is timid, she is introverted, and she is at the epitome of the negative aspects of her OCD. And so just seeing her come out of her shell, grow as a character, gain her confidence and all that, I truly do believe that is something that Steve takes a lot of pride in. And just he has grown with the character. It's obviously any sort of writing is going to have a vicarious aspect to it. And hey, Steve just likes writing vicariously and living as a, just kind of interestingly, overly analytical and her interests alone, the fact that she's obsessed with old school cinema, the fact that, there is a lot of Steve in this particular character, which I guess there's all too often going to be like the direct transference, and then there's going to be just the transference of observance, I guess. And I mean, they say you write what you know, and King has done that for almost 50 years now at this particular point. So, but is it a little too much Holly? I'm a little more on the fence on that. So I'm not gonna. I would love another just totally out of left field, full on horror sort of book, but he honestly hasn't done that since, Revival, which I cannot champion enough on this program, whether, in the episodes going forward here on Enfuegotainment or back on, the horror show when Hail to Stephen King was over there. But, you can't really just, put a gun to somebody's head, figuratively speaking, obviously, and just be like, yo, you need to write this sort of thing. It's like, even though he has hinted about another Dark Tower entry for many, many years at this particular point, I still remember when I had the opportunity to see Stephen King on the Sleeping Beauties book tour with his son Owen a number of years ago when I was first starting to do Hail to Stephen King. And he had somebody ask if he had another Dark Tower story in him. And he said, yep, I think I have one more in me. But then again, that at this point was like 6 years ago. So I don't know, man. I don't know. Red team go. It kind of is what it is in that regard. So, Steve has been very enraptured in the hard-boiled crime stuff. And a good chunk of the last decade of his writing has been devoted to that. Revival is an exception, obviously, as I just mentioned it, and I adore that book so much. And Fairy Tale is another exception. So those are really, really the biggest sort of deviations from the hard-boiled crime. Hard Case Crime have published 3 of his books at this point. Most recently, Later, which I really enjoyed. Later is probably the one that I have enjoyed the most since The Outsider, I guess. Although, once again, Life of Chuck, amazing in If It Bleeds. But the rest of If It Bleeds, Harrigan's Phone, that they made into a movie last year. So they got to that with the quickness, obviously, with Jaden Martell and Donald Pleasance. Donald Sutherland Pleasance. God damn it, I'm getting the two guys mixed up. Ugh, awful. I know I'll be corrected after the fact. But I want to say Sutherland now that I think about it. Yeah, because he's Kiefer Sutherland's father. So yeah, there was. I mean, between Harrigan's Phone and then Rat, which Ben Stiller is developing for Netflix right now, and then the If It Bleeds story with Holly. I mean, If It Bleeds, so I should probably get to that one because uh, I still think Finders Keepers is my favorite of the Hodges stories, and yet I felt like we got the best sense of Holly Gibney as a character in If It Bleeds. My biggest, or at least a character on her own. So without other people like leading a team. Now, granted, I mean, and she reteamed in that story with Jerome and his sister. So that was a big contingent of it. So it was very much another spin-off, pseudo sequel, epilogue, to the Finders Keeper, excuse me, the Hodges trilogy. But If It Bleeds, I felt like was where she was obviously the star for the first time in that one. Only a novella, though, and we know this one, and it's going to be her full time doing her thing. But I was curious here if, well, first we're definitely going to get a lot more of how her character has developed, which I'm intrigued and excited about. But we're also going to get from the synopsis, as vague as it is, okay, we've got two semi-retired intellectuals who were professors, and when they use the term unholy secret, it does really make me speculate, is this book going to have an aspect of the supernatural to it, which Holly had not encountered until the third book, End of Watch, in the Hodges trilogy, and that's obviously when Brady had that weird merging, but yet it was despite being otherworld. Well, it wasn't even completely otherworldly. It was more so like mad scientist experiment. Like I would probably classify End of Watch, my least favorite of the Hodges trilogy, as being a more of like a Frankenstein sort of situation. So yes, there are aspects of scary stuff there, but it was a little more on the sci-fi thriller side of things, in my opinion, than like full-fledged horror. And yeah, I mean, when you encounter a shapeshifter like she did in The Outsider, it's most definitely horror. That's most definitely supernatural, otherworldly, beyond. And that was my big gripe about If It Bleeds. If the fact that if it had done something beyond just the massive retread villain-wise that we got in If It Bleeds, I would have been slightly more forgiving, I would say, and maybe massively more forgiving, because the character work was still rich. And that's why I said a little earlier that I feel like that was the time when we got the best sense of Holly, just as opposed to being a sidekick or, working with a team of, other experts, some of which being a little sharper than her or well-versed or experienced in certain scenarios. Like when she was working with the team in The Outsider, a lot of those men had more professional experience and were older or whatever. And so that's why If It Bleeds was such a big thing, because it was really her leading the charge. The partner, Hodges' former partner, who has joined her in the Finders Keepers private detective agency that they mentioned. He was not in the mix in If It Bleeds. And so this is definitely going to be another instance, I'm assuming, and especially if Homie has COVID in this story. We're not going to have him actively involved. I would imagine he'll be giving her some insight and some advice, or maybe, since I know King's personal politics, and I'm not trying to bring any of mine in here, because I most definitely know people who have died from COVID, and not super super well, but I mean older people from my parents' church and stuff, and so I know very well just King's serious take on it and his hatred for those who did not take it seriously. And so for that reason, I would imagine, now that I think about it here, off the cuff, on the spot, live discussing things here, I do think that the partner is probably going to be just, incapacitated. Maybe he won't even be able to have any lines of dialogue. Maybe he will be completely sidelined and maybe on like a breathing machine in the hospital or something. So only time will tell when we get to actually check out this story properly. But this is where I'm curious, when, back to the term unholy, what that is going to signify for this presence of, elderly intellectuals that she is presumably going to be going to bat with. Are they just going to be just super sickos? Or when I hear unholy, does that mean maybe honestly, my inclination goes to like weird child sacrifice of some sort. I think that maybe they had taken children previously, and we're talking never found. And so that could be a possibility. And this is what was her name? Bonnie Doll. I'm trying to remember. That we'll just say the girl who gets kidnapped in this. We'll just classify it and leave it as that. If I just cycle back up to the name real quick, yeah, Bonnie Doll. So that's the girl who will have disappeared. So. What could these people be doing? And so that's where I do feel like this is going to be like Holly essentially graduated at the end of End of Watch in the finale of End of Watch, where we know what happens with Hodges without spoiling, and Brady and being vanquished and all of that. And so that was her first taste of like things being beyond the realm of logic and like grounded detective work. And the supernatural cranked in with The Outsider, and then obviously with If It Bleeds. So I was really speculative and curious if King was going to like reel it back almost, and it was going to be her, dealing with another just more of this world sort of presence. I mean, and those, for my money, in some cases can be significantly scarier, because the fact that there are real sick, horrible pieces of fucking shit out there that do things like this, and kidnap children and torture and all, I mean, sexual assaults and murder and all this horrible stuff. And you don't have to be demon possessed or whatever for something like that to happen. There are just inherently unbelievably beyond what I can even fathom people out there who do things like this. And so we don't need a supernatural aspect. So I did wonder if King was going to kind of bring it back down to earth a little bit. And so maybe he's meeting somewhere in the middle with the fact that, perhaps some of the stuff that this old couple have studied, maybe it was, I don't know, like ancient aspects of witchcraft, or, kind of trying to open up portals to other worlds or whatever. That's another thing. Like, will this be a book that is very much on its own? Or, well, I mean, it's very obviously not going to be on its own, because it connects with a character that has already been in 5 previous stories. So I take that back. But it does make me wonder how much more beyond the Holly Hodges stuff this could connect with the greater Stephen King universe. I think he's a little less about that at this particular point, than he was back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. I think he's kind of reeled that back a little bit, because, especially when he was dealing in, the Castle Rock connections, and any story that doesn't take place in Maine, from my experience with Steve, there will be more Easter egg sort of connections, or connections that constant readers, and in some cases tower junkies, like, Tack having similar characteristics in Desperation in The Regulators to, like the entity that is taking the form of Pennywise at times. And so could it be a similar sort of situation there, where there's just like minor connective tissue, or is it only going to be these Midwestern stories that we have had that Holly, resided within? I don't know. But I am really curious what they're going to, like, how they're going to make this older couple evil. And I do believe it's going to have something to do with an aspect that they have studied and became obsessed with. And obviously, that, like, typically when there is a duo involved, when it is a couple that are either kidnapping or killing, or if they have some sort of, let's just go as broad as possible. If they have a vice, it's why, like, drug addicts all too often get in relationships with other drug addicts at times, and it's the most toxic combination, right? When you both have that same really terrible vice. And so that's not to say that it's not often one way or the other, where you have somebody with, horrible inclinations, whether, for substance abuse or for violent acts or whatever it may be, that the partner, can't be the complete night and day opposite. Although usually that is a very abusive dynamic, or in the case of like a good marriage, the other person's completely oblivious to it, right? So that's a thing, obviously. But more often than not, if you have like some really sick thing that you're into, it does often happen, from what I've seen in both real life and in literature, where it's almost like a team up. and you can kind of just feed each other's obsession and these inclinations and whatnot. So, but I do think it's going to tie in with something they both researched, perhaps even separately. That's what brought them together. That's definitely something that has kept them together. And so, but I just keep coming back to that term, unholy. And the unholy aspect, the fact that he had to bring in some sort of almost pseudo-religious term like that really leads me to believe that this is going to be, something tying in with a hope for the supernatural of something to do with the dark arts, I guess, if I'm going to be just very broad with it, so to speak. But yeah, I guess that is about all that I had to say about it. Okay, Franz jumped on really quickly and said, too much Holly, no more. I'll read it anyway, of course, but damn, man. And then Jeff Highland, oh, man, love you, dudes, love you, Grokster. It's just a couple peeps that have jumped on here in the liveness of all of this, which is cool. But yeah, so that's the extent of my speculation about this. So I really am wondering what sort of, and I guess I'm going on record right here on Hail to Stephen King, that I do believe that this is going to be a situation where we have some older retired academic people that have a obsession with dark arts of some sort, and they are responsible for perhaps a series of kidnapping / disappearances of younger kids who are being utilized in blood rituals or what the hell ever, sort of sick approach may come into play. But that is at least the theory based on that brief synopsis that we got. But let's jump in right now, as everybody on the YouTubes likes to say, and let's see if we can get any additional clues from this excerpt, which was published in the Entertainment Weekly, because Entertainment Weekly is no longer an actual print magazine. I had subscribed to them for years and years and years. Not that I adored such mainstream coverage, but as a journalist myself, going all the way back to the print days, in 2008 for me, and then segueing into more music coverage and doing VJ work, and then getting involved with the horror show and being pretty much a video only sort of guy. That is another thing that's been really fun about returning to school, despite all of the stress with pursuing this film and media studies bachelor's. It's got me reacclimated with having to write. I've had to write lots of essays. I wrote my essay in Denver. I wrote my essay in Florida. I wrote there's my South Park reference for the episode, everybody. But yeah, I've been required to write again. And, once again, I started out as a print journalist. So it's been interesting kind of getting those gears greased again. And who knows what that could mean for just, personal creativity on my part, or even for just, I don't know, finally doing something with these .coms that I own and getting into more writing. I don't know. We shall see. But as far as Holly goes, releasing September 5th, we're not sure where in the book this portion is actually taken from, although we do know that this is going to be something that is before, when at least, so the synopsis said that Holly's partner at Finders Keepers, Bill Hodge's old partner, retired partner who joined up with Holly in the detective agency, he has COVID. So we know a portion of the story is going to take place in either 2020, 2021-ish, okay? Maybe it could be 2022 because, King can really set it at any time post-pandemic. And who knows, maybe it will be presumed present day as opposed to a couple years before. But I know he had done some interviews where he had specified that, I had to change some dates in a book that I was working on because of what happened with, the virus spreading and everything. And so, in any event, we know that with this being October 17th, 2012, that this will be presumably a flashing back aspect of the narrative. And I'm guessing this is going to give us some context about the aforementioned academics who are presumed villains in this. And so October 17th, 2012. And I'm just going to read it all out for you guys. So this is one. It's an old city and no longer in very good shape, nor is the lake beside which it has been built. But there are parts of it that are still pretty nice. Longtime residents would probably agree that the nicest section is Sugar Heights, and the nicest street running through it is Ridge Road, which makes a gentle downhill curve from Bell College of Arts and Sciences to Deerfield Park, 2 miles below. On its way, Ridge Road passes many fine homes, some of which belong to college faculty and some to the city's most successful business people. Doctors, lawyers, bankers, and top of the pyramid business executives. Most of these homes are Victorians with impeccable paint jobs, bow windows, and lots of gingerbread trim. The park where Ridge Road terminates isn't as big as the one that sits splat in the middle of Manhattan, but close. Deerfield is the city's pride, and a platoon of gardeners keep it looking fabulous. Oh, there's the unkempt west side near Red Bank Avenue, known as the Thickets, where those seeking or selling drugs can sometimes be found after dark, and where there's the occasional mugging. But the Thickets is only 3 acres, 740. The rest are grassy, flowery, and threaded with paths where lovers stroll and benches where old men read newspapers, more and more often on electronic devices these days, and women chat, sometimes while rocking their babies back and forth in expensive prams. There are 2 ponds, and sometimes you'll see men or boys selling remote-controlled boats on one of them. And the other, swans and ducks glide back and forth. There's a playground for the kiddies, too. Everything, in fact, except a public pool. Every now and then, the city council discusses the idea, but it keeps getting tabled. The expense, This night in October is warm for the time of year, but a fine drizzle has kept all but a single dedicated runner inside. That would be George Castro, who is a gig teaching creative writing and Latin American lit at the college. Despite his specialty, he's American born and bred. George likes to tell people he's as American as pide manzana. All right. He turned 40 in July and can no longer kid himself that he is still the young lion who had momentarily bestseller success with his first novel. 40 is when you have to stop kidding yourself that you're still a young anything. If you subscribe to such self-actualizing bullshit as 40 is the new 25, you're going to find yourself starting to slide. Just a little at first, but then a little more, and all at once you're 50 with a belly poking out your belt buckle and cholesterol busters in the medicine cabinet. At 20, the body forgives. At 40, forgiveness is provisional at best. George Castro doesn't want to turn 50 and discover he's just another American man slob. You have to start taking care of yourself when you're 40. You have to maintain the machinery because there's no trade-in options. So George drinks orange juice in the morning, potassium, followed most days by oatmeal, antioxidants, and keeps red meat to once a week. When he wants a snack, he's apt to open a can of sardines. They're rich in omega-3s, also tasty. He does simple exercises in the morning and runs in the evening. Not overdoing it, but aerting those 40-year-old lungs and giving his 40-year-old heart a chance to strut its stuff. Resting heart rate, 63. George wants to look and feel 40 when he gets to 50. But fate is a joker. George Castro isn't even going to see 41. Okay. Underwhelming, obviously, at least from a revelatory standpoint, okay? But what I will say is it's very much King's world building that he is so famous for. So he is painting the picture of where the predominance of this tale is presumably going to take place, okay? So this is the academic, this college town, obviously, based on the fact that there's this Bell College of Arts and Sciences that is there. That's obviously going to be the institution where our villains, this elderly couple that we've talked a little bit about, that's where their affiliation is going to lie. And yet we have another instance where, so King describes the serenity, just the beauty of this area, the fact that it's very well-to-do. It's a college town. So if you live there, you're probably well off and affiliated with, or at least if you live nearby the campus. You obviously have some sort of affiliation or you're a student because it is a very rich area from the way that he is describing everything. And yet very much, slice of life, upper middle class America is the way that, he's kind of describing stuff. All those vibes of Americana that King is so famous for with, describing, the fact that there's the one pond that the kids, have their little like remote control boats in. And then the other one is where the wildlife are, and from describing the old men reading on their tablets to the women with their babies and all this different stuff. So he is very much painting a portrait of a place that seems safe and serene, and I guess that does juxtapose and contrast the character that is obviously about to die. And this is something that King is notorious for, and I've always had mixed feelings about it, right? Because of the fact that, it's King does this in his books all the time, where he's like, and so and so and so and so would never see that person again, so he likes to totally just, I don't know, give the inclination. He likes to, as opposed to, he likes to spoil the surprise, I guess, he likes to very much just not leave anything up to the imagination, I guess. And he likes to premeditate it. He likes to forewarn it for whatever reason. It's something that he's very fond of. And I don't, honestly, like a shocker, when something just hits you off guard, I've always found to be a little bit more effective. But it's not a narrative device that King is obviously fond of, because he lets us know about this guy. Oh man, and the whole taking care of yourself when you're about to be 40 and all that stuff. As I'm winding down here in my 30s, it's that hit a little close to home for me personally. I'm not going to lie, but so yeah, well, this gives us the impression though that maybe this unholy inclination of this elderly couple, because it does make me believe that they're going to be the ones responsible for the death of this George Castro character. So maybe I'm completely off basis, but just on pure speculation here. So maybe it's not just children. Maybe it is just a disappearance of maybe a particular race or nationality or something, that these academics, whatever the hell that their unholy inclinations are towards. I don't know, but lo and behold, it does give the vibe that it's not just going to be a black phone sort of situation where, okay, the target is just children. So we at least have that clarified. But really, beyond that, this doesn't give us much of any impression. I feel like we have more of a like the excerpt that we got for Fairy Tale, for instance. I felt like, because it was the kid going down through the swirling stairs, about to jump into the other world with radar. I thought that was significantly more intriguing than this. But once again, just the way the style of writing that he was employing here, I am most definitely getting that same vibe that I had in most notably The Outsider. I would say even more so than the Hodges trilogy, because the way King described the serenity and the safety, presumably, of that Midwestern town, and then to all of a sudden, to describe how great things are, but then all of a sudden you find a kid who has been, we know, I don't need to go into the horrors of what happens to that baseball kid victim at the beginning of The Outsider, but it's this was giving me similar vibes to that personally. So I don't know, everybody. That's we have had some peeps jump in, at least a little bit. So that's the excerpt, everybody. And since there's a little bit more of a presence here now, once again, this was, for those late joiners, this was a last minute thing. I have been so busy with Arizona State that I have not really known when I'm going to have time for Hail to Stephen King, but I turned in my first research paper on Sunday night, and I finally had the slightest little bit of breathing room. And sure enough, it coincided almost like within 24 hours of finding out yesterday about the Entertainment Weekly article and stuff. And so, it's just timing is always everything and very interesting. So I see my dude Jose Storms is there. Hey, Jaime, long days and pleasant nights. Likewise, may yours be twice as long, good sir. Carl O'Connor says, Holly will be released in September, right? Yep, September 5th to be correct. So probably the only King book we'll get this year, even with the talk of another possibly called Rattlesnake. Yeah, Carl, the Rattlesnake one, I still think we might even see it earlier, because he gave the impression that that's either a short story or a novella. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it is a short story, he might even just publish it in one of the papers. Like, he has published things in Esquire and the New Yorker in the last few years. And so it's going to be dependent upon length when it comes to Rattlesnake, which is the one that's kind of a spiritual successor of sorts to to Cujo. And so that's a thing there. But yeah, it's just kind of it's exciting in said regard that we do still have a potential for two stories. But to echo Carl's sentiments there, I'm definitely not holding my breath that we're going to get both of them. But who knows? I mean, with this coming out September 5th, King has had cycles where he put out something at the beginning of September and then dropped something in December right before the holidays. So I do think, especially if he went so far as to tease Rattlesnake, it's obviously going to be before or after. So I'm not holding my breath for anything in the spring, maybe early summer, or it's either going to be like early summer for Rattlesnake if we ever do see it. Because remember, King has teased stories many times and then not delivered, unfortunately. We're still waiting on that Dark Tower that he made reference to on the Sleeping Beauties book tour when I saw him. So yeah, I do think that my money is on the fact that we will see Rattlesnakes, especially if he went to so much trouble as to mention it in that interview. But yeah, since it's a shorter story, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see it in one of the papers. So okay. Nicholas Oaks says, "You rule, Fuego. As long as Holly isn't up against another outsider Pennywise entity, I will be a glass half full guy on this one." Corey Novak says, "What's up, everyone?" Corey, what is up, my dude? So very glad to see you here. Good Sarah Horns up to you, obviously, man. And yeah, to echo what my buddy Nick Oaks just said there, up in the Great Northwest. Yeah, I'm just happy in this regard that what Holly is dealing with doesn't feel like a retread of anything that she has faced previously. And so that's what I find at least the most to be optimistic about with regards to this. And so, yeah, it's nothing like Brady Hartsfield. And I still scratch my head about why King decided to go with a almost identical villain in If It Bleeds as in The Outsider. I will never, there's a number of things about Cy King where I will never understand some of his literary decisions as a writer. And I mean, I know he's getting up there in years or whatever, and I know he tried to give it some slightly different wrinkles in If It Bleeds, but yeah, Nick, you're totally right, man. That was one of my biggest problems with If It Bleeds, because I felt like it was the best he had ever written. The Holly character was in If It Bleeds. So the fact that the opposition, the antagonists or antagonists, plural, as we know this academic couple is going to be, and who knows whatever other evil forces may be pulling the proverbial strings on them or whatever. But yeah, I'm intrigued by this. It's the more I've thought about it, because I read the synopsis briefly yesterday, because I was finally actually getting to work yesterday after getting so much of my schoolwork done, and those first so much came to a head last weekend with my first lengthy research paper for this science class that I'm taking, and it's like dealing with physics and chemistry and astronomy and things that I was never one of those people in high school, man. Give me my English and my history. I was never a math and science sort of guy. But yeah, so I was glad that I got some breathing room, and I read the synopsis yesterday, and I felt a little underwhelmed. But even after rereading it just now here on the air while doing this show, I'm a lot more curious. I'm not going to say I'm like over the moon, like, fuck yeah, that sounds awesome. But I'm at least happy it's not going to be a retread like Nick had just said. So Jose says, I think it could be a little after If It Bleeds, since King sets the novella in the winter of 2020. I was trying to remember when he said that it was taking place. I knew it was during the pandemic, so either 20 or 21. I just could not remember which. So yeah, that does give some context, obviously. And I had assumed it was going to take place after If It Bleeds, or at least right around the same time. But yeah, so Jose coming in with the assist. Yep. Oh, believe me, Corey, I know. I've got we have sports betting here in Arizona now, and so I've got a little wager on the game. But it's not a money line. It's not who's going to win the game. It's I know they've won like 3 out of their last 7. So, and I was actually at the Suns game when they played Memphis on Sunday. That was the first getting to go out and do something in 2 weeks since school started at Arizona State. So, okay, Carl O'Connor says, yeah, been 2 a year for a while. Yeah, word up. Corey, yeah, Paul is back. Paul actually came back all of a sudden on Sunday night. He was still listed as out on the injury report on Sunday, and then they just decided to bring him back, and he had 22 and 11. So who the hell knows? We shall see. We shall see. Don't know if Ball will be in or out. Yeah, I heard, Corey, Ball was questionable for tonight. And I know Charlotte played last night. So, but in any event, veering back to, Movie Mike, what is up, good sir? No, once again, Movie Mike, and for anybody, I'm so stoked that we actually got some people in for this because, 2 weeks ago, I had said, whenever I have time for Hail to Stephen King, it's going to be back on Saturdays, which is where it originated, was either a Saturday or a Sunday show. It was your weekend worship was what I used to call it. But we shifted it to Tower Tuesdays when it was still on the horror show. And then just to once again shout out Cecil and the horror show, which I am still very much a part of. We did a bunch of filming on Sunday. I'm going to be seeing him and Robert again this upcoming Sunday, which is where we're going to be doing a live stream talking about the relaunch and recalibration of the horror show. We're also going to be giving some additional details about Dylan's New Nightmare, which, guys, he got his first rough cut of Dylan's New Nightmare, and I'm not at liberty to discuss much, but I got to see the opening scene. It's looking fucking rad. Oh, I'm so excited for him. But so in any event, yes, it was just very interesting, the timing of everything with finally getting the slightest little breather assignment-wise at school, and the announcement coming yesterday, and then I was like, well, shizzle, I got to try to at least do something live on the Tower Tuesday to talk about this and get everybody's thoughts. And so, yes, everybody, obviously, if you are in the after liveness of this and you want to give some thoughts on the premise, I'll try to link something in the description to this Entertainment Weekly article so that anybody who is inclined can, just read that if you don't want to just hear me rattle it off or whatever. So that'll be a thing. But yes, what are your thoughts about the synopsis? If you have any predictions, if you're totally sick of Holly, I'm somewhere in between about Holly and just the amount of usage by King. I'm gonna kind of take the more okay with it though, as Nick Oakes said. I think I'm okay with this being another Holly story, just so long as it's something drastically different than what we have just seen her experience and go up against before. So, okay. Rick and Morty, the only TV show to ever reference the Langoliers, says DM. I don't know because I don't watch Rick and Morty. I checked out a few episodes. It was not quite my speed. It wasn't super into it, but Cecil and so many of my friends, they love the hell out of that show. So, hey, what are you going to do, man? Different strokes and so on and so forth. And Cell turned 17 today. Jose, I love Cell. I genuinely love that book. I think it is so underrated, especially because of the fact that so many other people had done Rage Demons, Rage Zombies, and all this other stuff right around the same time. It is very much, because Stephen King dedicates Cell to his buddy George Romero. And as everybody knows, George Romero, well, maybe you don't know, George Romero did a kind of zombie thing called The Crazies in the 1970s, and that was actually remade very, very well with Timothy Olyphantastic in the aughts. And the Crazies, I felt, was a major inspiration for what he did with Cell, and yet it was just Psy-King folding in the fear of technology and all that other stuff. And even though it's not great, I did not despise the adaptation with Samuel L. Jackson and John Cusack re-teaming to do a Psy-King story, because they did 1408 previously. But it's really the fact that King decided to change the ending, because King actually wrote the script for the Cell movie, and where I felt like they got a lot of stuff, especially at the college, really well. And I got a good sense of the dread at the airport and, just the fear of some of those opening action beats, because Cell is definitely one of those books by King that it feels like just it's screaming out to be a film because of the way that he just describes, and he has these action set pieces, very much like recently when I was revisiting The Running Man. I was like, the fact that there's these action beats of these really just thrilling variety. Excuse me. I was like, okay, this needs to be a movie, most definitely. So I'm hopeful that Edgar Wright gets back around to doing that and whatnot. But okay, I don't mind Holly, but I think she needs a long break from everything. And, hopefully this will be Holly's send-off, Holly's siesta, at least for the foreseeable future, and that maybe he will have gotten this character at least enough out of his system, depending on what happens with her. Not that I'm predicting she's going to die or anything, but then, boy, would that be crazy if King decided to go really heavy with something like that. But I don't expect that. at all. I'm also wondering if we're going to see like Jerome and his sister or any of those other characters, or if it is going to be, strictly, have you read King's script for Cell? DM, I haven't read the script, but obviously I've seen the film, and being a big fan of the book, everything that's in a script doesn't always make it into the feature. There's scenes that get shot and get cut. There's things that are, there's also different versions of scripts too. So, but no, DM, I definitely have not actually read the script that King did for it. So, but yeah, so jumping back to this, guys, while I would have liked something different, beggars can't be choosers, especially with your favorite author. And for that reason, I'm cool with another Holly story. And thankfully, it does seem to be just forging itself into, at least from a narrative standpoint, some different territory. I know it's going to be probably pretty heavy-handed with certain aspects of politics because of the COVID factor and everything. And I know that could potentially rub some peeps the wrong way. But nonetheless, I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic about this one, and bring it on is what I shall say. So, I've been going for almost an hour already, and I know there were so many late additions to the party, but I'm actually going to jump into the other bit of King news that we had break since the last time I saw everybody, and that is the fact that Rob Savage, who is the director of first he did Host during the pandemic. So I'm not sure if anybody, but I know a lot of like more niche horror fans saw it, and that it became this big cult success. Host was the film where it was essentially the seance on Zoom, and it was a British movie. I do believe Rob Savage is a British writer-director. And so after the success of Host, he proceeded to do Dash Cam for Blumhouse, which a lot of people hate that movie. I was entertained by the sheer lunacy of Dash Cam, and I think a lot of people, to call out some friends of mine too, and even Cecil, my cohort in horror over at the horror show and everything. He hated Dash Cam, and he hated it because he hated the lead character so much, and yet you weren't supposed to like her, man. She is as obnoxious and awful and everything, but that flick just went for it. Like that shit was bonkers, man, and it was relentless, and I appreciated it for that sheer fact. And so I was a fan of Dash Cam. I really was. Didn't make my top of 2022 or anything, but still. So Rob Savage signs this first look deal, and so he gets tapped to develop an adaptation of The Boogeyman, which is the short story from Night Shift. And it's been adapted into various Dollar Babies over the years. I think I've seen at least a half dozen, if not more, Dollar Baby versions of it over the course of the last 30-something years since the story was initially 40-something years now. Shit. Since that story was initially collected, because that was being collected in Night Shift, but it was published years before. That story is like friggin' 50 years old around at this point. And, Boogeyman, evil in the closet, and it's all about a guy who was talking with a shrink about, the death of his child and how it destroyed his relationship and, fear of the boogeyman and all this different stuff. And so this will be the first time we've actually seen it as a full feature. But, and it's also got the girl from, what is it? She's on the Yellow Jackets show, and she's excellent. I'm trying to remember the name of the actress. Sophie Thatcher. And then you also have David Dastmalchian. You have Marin Ireland, who is kick-ass. She was on Why the Last Man, Umbrella Academy. She's been in a number of different things. There was a horror movie from a few years ago that is totally eluding me. It wasn't Super Dark Times. God damn it. In any event, so we have a talented cast. We have a very capable director. I've seen, my buddy Cole Meredith. I really hope I didn't butcher his last name if he happens to tune into this at some point. But filmmaker in his own right, part of the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. And he was really ticked off about this being PG-13, and he immediately wrote it off that it was going to have no potential whatsoever of being good, despite the fact that I really think you can push it with PG-13 horror. Whether it's Andy Muschetti's Mama or the Insidious films. The Others, The Sixth Sense. And his argument to that was the fact that, okay, well, it's a grisly child death in this and whatever. It's like, yeah, but you don't have to actually show the grisly child death. Sometimes it's a lot more horrifying to just see the reaction of the parents or, whatever else it may be. And you can have a really rad, scary looking creature, without getting into spoilers, if that's actually what we have, I don't know. I don't think this needs to be like filled with grisly gore or anything to be genuinely unsettling and scary. And indications are actually pointing that that may be the case, because originally the Boogeyman was scheduled to be releasing in the summer of 2023, and it was going to be releasing in the summer of 2023 directly to Hulu. So this was a movie that has affiliation with 20th Century Studios, which is what used to be 20th Century Fox. And then remember, they were acquired. Fox was bought by Disney. So Disney, as I've said various times, owns like my childhood, between Star Wars, Marvel, and then when they bought Fox, and I'm just like, God, you have Aliens and Predator now too? You own my childhood, for God's sake. But so interestingly enough, though, they decided to maintain 20th Century Studios along with Searchlight and, some of the Fox subsidiaries as their own independent studios working under the Disney umbrella. So I'm very happy about that because, Avatar, Way of Water, that's a 20th Century Studios film. Owned by Disney, obviously, but Cameron had been working on that movie long before the Fox acquisition, and so, but yeah, so it's a 20th Century Studios film. It was supposed to be going to Hulu, similar to what they did with the Prey movie, the Predator prequel, which was excellent and one of my favorites of last year in 2022. But apparently, they screened it to test audiences recently, and the response was so overwhelmingly positive that they were just like, okay, guess we pull a Megan here, because, Megan was supposed to be direct to a streamer, and that's also PG-13, although there are rumors that it was supposed to be R, and they did some trimming, and they, got it down to a PG-13, whatever. And that film has made a shit ton of money on a very meager budget. This is also another meagerly budgeted horror film. And so, they decided, all right, we're going to roll the dice and we're going to put it out in theaters. And this, the same thing happened with Smile last year for Paramount, I believe. It was either Paramount or it was Paramount. And that was a movie that was supposed to go straight to streamer, lower to mid-budget horror, like under to around 20 million. And that movie also was one of the biggest box office successes of last year. Really, really good movie too. And so apparently this tested very well with test audiences. I actually had the chance to see it a couple weeks ago. And since I was just about to start school, and then also I was like, do I really want to go see? I don't like going to really, really early test screenings. And as a critic myself, the only way I can get into them is if I just kind of like don't give the full extent of my information. And then there's also sometimes where they will consult and they want our opinions. There's embargoes in that. So it's not like I could even write or read anything anyway, or I would lose credential. But, nonetheless, I chose not to go to it because I was like, okay, they might make some changes and I want to see what the finished product is, as opposed to maybe something that I could have liked more and then they switch things up. I mean, because art is subjective, as I always say on this channel. And so for that reason, it's like, yeah, you can't always have that, you can't have your cake and eat it too in that regard. And so, but it tested very well. And so they decided, you know what, we're going to put this sumbitch in theaters. And lo and behold, now it is releasing, let's get the exact date, June 2nd, 2023. So that is coming out in the prime heart of summer. So that means that they got an enthusiastic enough response to roll the dice and also to place it where they did in the release schedule. And it'll be really good counter programming. I think if it is a solid film, it gets good reviews or word of mouth buzz, whatever it may be. But you also do need counter programming to all of the big budget, crazy superhero, Fast 10, all this different shit that will be like around it in the summer season. So yeah, I'm honestly pretty hopeful, even beyond that, to the point of maybe some confidence that this could be really creepy and unnerving. And I'm fine with the PG-13 rating. I genuinely am. It's nothing that I'm going to bat an eye at, as far as like making me think that this could be bad just based on that rating. especially with being very, very familiar with the subject matter and what the twist entails. I'm most curious how they're going to expand it into a full-fledged feature film. But I mean, there is enough time that is recanted to the shrink in this by the father that, yeah, and you can most definitely approach it as such. So I'm going to jump back to the comments because being well over an hour and wanting to make sure to hit the mention of that, I do have to wrap things up here in just a little bit. I do have one additional bit of information that I wanted to jump onto. So I like the US cover for Holly, the UK cover, however, yeah. I'm assuming, DM, that the UK cover is the one that has the magnifying glass and the blood, and that the US cover, being the one that they're showing in Entertainment Weekly, it's got a different sense of like eeriness and stuff to it, which yeah, Movie Mike says Dash Cam was fun. I thought so too. A lot of people hated it because they just hated that girl going around rapping and just being such a bitch face. Anyway, Jose chimes in and says, kind of a side note, after rewatching The Langoliers, I totally forgot that they straight up reference 11/22/63 before the book was ever written. Yeah, Jose, the interesting thing about that is King had referenced that particular story. And I mean, the event even of itself, he's referenced it countless times in his books over the years. So he had been kind of contemplating about that one for decades. The gears had been turning. It was like, you know how he's often said on record that he gets an idea and he just like puts it in a box in his head, and then sometimes he goes back and he opens up the boxes. Anyway, I'm looking forward to Last Voyage of Demeter. Corey, 100%. André Verdal, dude. I thought he is a badass director. I mean, Autopsy of Jane Doe, he did a solid job with Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Yeah, very talented director. Off topic, that's one that I'm quite excited about. King talks about traveling back in time to stop the Kennedy assassination in a lot of books. Yep, DM, as I was just saying, you beat me to it. Beat me to it there. Agreed. They can really play up the suspense without going for an all-out splatterfest. And often you can really be creepier. That is the specific descriptor I'm looking for. You can be creepier than, without just like a visceral onslaught of like gore and gruesome. So, okay, DM says, Jaime, what do you think of New Salem's Lot runtime only being 113 minutes? Is that enough to cover the story? It's definitely, I guess it depends how much of the nuance you would like them to cover. What I'm assuming they will have to do is drastically diminish the cast of characters. And if you look at the IMDb and you see that it's really down to, I mean, Mears and, yeah, it's, and what, Mark Petrie, I want to say his name is, yeah, because it's the Glick brothers who are the ones who have the thing that goes down with them, right? So, yeah, and obviously Father Callahan. But yeah, I think it's going to be a very lean and mean version, because the thing about the book is that the book, as I think I've said on this program countless times now, is that the Salem's Lot novel is really the template for what King would go on to do in stuff like Needful Things and Under the Dome and any of these books, and it as well. Books that have these large casts of characters in a small town, and how so many of them get their own little snapshots and bits and stuff like that. I think that they can tackle the runtime in around 2 hours, but I probably would have liked, more than 2 hours. I mean, probably like in the 2.5 range, I think probably would have been a little bit better. But if it's going to be lean and mean, I think they can do it. I do. It's going to be very much a Cliff Notes, but the Cliff Notes of Salem's Lot are pretty gangster, man. So yeah, I think it's possible. What I'm less confident about than the runtime is Gary Dauberman, but that's a completely different sort of situation. Okay. Corey says, I saw an article recently about James Wan being a producer on the new Tommyknockers. Yeah, Corey, you were correct. That's been allegedly in development for a little while now. It's not one of those dead projects where we hear, an announcement that they've acquired the IP and that, they're going to do something with it and then not a peep. And plus, with the prominence of Wan, Wan is making a bunch of money right now as the co-production company behind Megan. That is making gangbusters right now. And although I do think that when and if we ever get the proper release of this Salem's Lot film, because, it's not even on the release slate right at the moment, which really sucks. But once we do finally get that in theaters, I think the possibility of what happens with the Tommyknockers adaptation is going to be dependent upon how that Salem's Lot that Juan produced performs. So, but yes, it is apparently a thing. If only Salem's Lot had the same trajectory. Exactly, movie Mike, 100%. Well, you see, DM, I didn't hear that Warner Brothers deemed the written script too expensive to film. Well, you must have read a report that I never saw, because of the fact that I thought as recently as is what I was searching for there, as recently as, like, I believe it's still listed on the IMDb, but then again, how accurate is that shit? So I don't know. Only time will tell, but I can definitely agree that if that was the case, that would make the most sense, because of the fact that to do Tommyknockers justice, and, with all of the upheaval at Warner Brothers, with the Discovery merger and films getting canceled that were already pretty much in the can and whatnot. The story checks out. So, okay. The article I read was a couple days ago. I post a link if I could. One was also going to produce Tommyknockers, but the whole project was canceled. The screenwriter said so. Okay. Well, there you go. At this point, I will just be thrilled if Salem's Lot releases at all. And yeah, Movie Mike, that's something that I think you have said before. I know I've said it various times, because I have an essence of skepticism about me. I don't think it's going to be completely shelved, but I do probably expect more so. Although maybe they're also doing a wait and see. They're like, hey, we'll see how the Boogeyman performs, since that's going to theaters, even though it's a separate studio behind it. Yeah, we shall see. So, okay. Oh boy, it's already almost 6:00 my time, and I was really cutting it close to my potential cutoff. So yeah, June 2nd, I believe, was it June 2nd or June 3rd, that we are getting this this new adaptation that was originally supposed to be going directly to Hulu. And so now June 2nd, 2023, only in theaters, which is the term that they love to use. So it's not going to be like a hybrid release, like with the later Halloween films with Jamie Lee Curtis that came out recently. Nothing of that nature. So that's I'm sure if it doesn't do particularly well, like they're hoping, it'll probably end up on Hulu in a couple weeks afterwards. But I don't know. I'm honestly thinking this one could be pretty cool, despite the PG-13 rating. And so lastly, the bit of information that I wanted to, and this is just a footnote, honestly, but today the Oscars were announced. I still have yet to have the time to sit down and go like entry by entry for, all of the categories, best picture, and, all of the acting, sectors and whatnot. But I know the Razzies were also announced this past week, and I feel kind of bad for this little girl. I genuinely do, because I thought she kicked ass in not the most recent season of American Horror Story, the New York City one that just ended. I'm trying to remember what the proper subtitle was. Inconsequential, though. She was on the season before that, and she played this young little vampire, and I thought she was awesome. And when they announced that Ryan Kira Armstrong is her name, when they announced her for the new Firestarter, yeah, I was honestly really hopeful, especially with the director of so many goddamn movies, man. In any event, director, where is his name? It's not. Man, we're losing ratings. Oh yeah, Keith Thomas. Yeah. Yeah, I was really hopeful that Firestarter could be pretty cool. And so they announced the Razzies, and that little 12-year-old is on there as worst performance. And I got to say, man, I saw in major theatrical releases a lot of far worse performances. Like, really, for me, she wasn't even that bad in the movie. The real problem was the fact that the script was bad, the fact that it felt like lazy movie making to me in a lot of ways. Now, granted, she wasn't great, and everybody's like the liar, pants on fire. I'm like, you guys wrote this stuff for her, okay? So for the most part, I didn't think she was awful, and she definitely was not awful enough to be nominated for a Razzie at 12 years old. But for whatever reason, I did not like this movie, but I have seen it on a lot of worst of the year lists, like from critics that I like on YouTube, and they're just like, yes, and like, I mean, everyone from like the Jeremy Johns to Dan Merles to all these people, I guess, man, people really, really hated this Firestarter movie. But then again, I'm a little bit more forgiving, even if I didn't like it. I even find positive things to say about the missed television series on Spike. And so I don't know, man. I just felt bad when I saw that she got that Razzies nomination. And I mean, and then Bryce Dallas Howard's on there. And man, Dominion sucked ass, but that performance was like far worse. And also, that was another situation, though, where I don't necessarily think she was the one responsible for the lack of quality on display. So I don't know, man. I don't know. Red team go, red team go. Yeah, Firestarter got a Razzie. I am surprised. I didn't think it was great, but no, Movie Mike, that's the way I felt. I was like, damn, somebody had an axe to grind about this one. And yeah, to have her not, and you know, it was a Variety article I was reading. They were just like, feels a little mean I mean, as if the Razzies aren't already mean-spirited to begin with, you know, but from a sarcastic sense. But I feel like that's a little much going after, you know, this 12-year-old girl. You know, maybe it should at least be adult actors. Maybe, I mean, at least, you know, I don't know, 18 or more. I don't know. But then again, you get leads in movies that are, you know, not adults. So I don't know, man. But that was just something that I wanted to finish up the proceedings with today, because it was a bit of key information where I was just like, wow, all right, man, going after that little girl. It was not a good movie, but she was not, I mean, I guess Drew Barrymore was fine. And I don't know how much better Drew was in the original movie too. I mean, as Charlie, she was fine. But yeah, in any event, I thought that was just kind of amusing, but in a sad, like messed up sort of way. But alrighty, guys, I just need to extend a grande gracias to anybody who actually tuned into this specifically live. I know it's gonna, you know, find some eyes after the fact, but this was just based on the fact that the King information hit yesterday, a last minute sort of idea where I really, really wanted to stick around and yeah, just have a little bit of palaver when I have schoolwork and, you know, actual, like, I have to go out and do some real, like, the actual, like, bill paying work as well right now. So that's another thing. But yes, for anybody who happened to stumble upon this and tune in, and just greatly appreciated. I'm really hoping in the coming weeks that I can get something more consistent going as to, you know, a real release schedule. But yeah, to just the balancing act of, you know, school and work and relationship, and, you know, still trying to do the horror show, and I'm still in a band and seeing those guys. I mean, yeah, it's a lot. It's definitely a lot, but it means so very much to anybody who tuned in live, or if you are seeing this after the fact, leave a comment, or, you know, you guys know the drill, you know, the thumbs up, the liking, you know, and subscribing, sharing, yada, 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 all of that stuff. But yes, I extend a grande gracias to Jaime and Fuego. And yeah, I'm still on all the social media sectors: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, obviously. Yeah, I'm not a YouTube, obviously. Yeah, I haven't really been as active on social media. Like, Twitter is still where you will find at least articles that I give a crap about, developments in the entertainment world, whether it's spooky stuff or otherwise. That's typically where you will find the most from me. But I try to pop on Facebook when I can. But once again, these first 2 weeks of being back at school, we're getting acclimated with what this balancing act is going to entail. So at this rate, yeah, I mean, I am reading when I can, right back there, Doohickey. That's the current Stephen King book that I am going back over for its proverbial anniversary, 15 years now, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's exciting. I love that book, and I can't recommend it enough for anybody inclined. I will be doing some sort of revisit video about why this hasn't been made into a film yet, you know, because they've tried a number of times, and unsuccessfully, regrettably. But that is one that I would love to see. And I still have a Joe Hill video that I'm trying to finish up about the sequel to his comic book, Basket Full of Heads. It's called Refrigerator Full of Heads, but that's just one that, while filmed, it entails, you know, a decent amount of overlaying of pictures from the comic book and whatnot. And so even though Joe Hill didn't write it, the fact that it's a sequel to his story, I really wanted to cover it either back when I was, you know, still doing this time slot, this subject matter on the horror show. But so now that will be on here. And yeah, so just stay tuned. And, you know, you guys know the drill of hitting the bell so that when there is any bit of new content up. But I'm trying in the future, But once again, I had no idea we were going to get king information out of nowhere yesterday. And so that's why I sporadically had to make some time. So everybody, thank you so very much once again. Arigato merci, and all of that jazziness. This has been my thoughts on Holly, which is releasing September 5th by Sai King, my beloved El Rey. And so thanks again, everybody. And until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sen amigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you. I'm hopeful we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later and have been well met. And until that instance occurs, remember to read Stephen King. Yeah, that's right. And Night Shift, guys. I mean, seriously, it's good. It's very, very good. And that's where the boogeyman is dwelling. So, all right, everybody, go Phoenix. Haha. Laters.